I thought my dad forgetting my birthday was bad, but then I found the bank statements he hid for my half-brother's trust fund. My entire life, I've lived in the shadow of my father's second, shinier, more successful family. It's not something he ever said out loud, not something we ever discussed over the awkward, silent dinners every other weekend, but it was a truth as palpable as the cheap laminate flooring in my mom's apartment versus the polished hardwood in his house. Amor, by the way. The daughter from the first try, the practice child, the one who came along when two dumb 20-year-olds, my mom and dad, got drunk one night and decided that keeping me was a better idea than, well, I'm not sure what the other option was, but I'm certain it was discussed. I was a consequence, not a choice. A responsibility, not a joy. They split up before I could form a single memory of them together. My mom, God love her, is a chaotic whirlwind of a human being. She loves fiercely with her whole heart, but her life is a constant, beautiful mess. She's the kind of person who will forget to pay the electric bill but will spend her last $20 on art supplies to have a crafting day with you. Our home was a rented two-bedroom that always smelled vaguely of incense and whatever she was burning that day on the stove. We never went hungry, our clothes were always cleanish, and the apartment, while cluttered with half-finished art projects, stacks of library books and thrift store finds waiting for a new coat of paint, was a home filled with laughter, impromptu dance parties, and too loud music from a stereo that was older than I was. But I knew, even as a kid, that the reason my sneakers were from the discount store and my school trips were paid for in meticulously counted loose change was because she was pouring every spare penny, every ounce of her energy into making sure my brother Jake and I had what we needed. She worked 2 jobs, often 3, and the permanent dark circles under her eyes were a badge of honor she never wanted but wore anyway. I remember once for my 10th birthday I really wanted this specific doll all the girls had. It was expensive. My birthday came and there was no doll. I tried to hide my disappointment, but kids are terrible actors. 2 weeks later she came home exhausted from a double shift, and with a triumphant smile, handed me a slightly wonky hand-sewn version of that doll. "Store was out," she'd said, her eyes sparkling. "So I made you a limited edition. I still have it. It's worth more to me than any trust fund." Then there's my dad. He's the opposite. Precision. Order. Success. He met Hildy, a sharp, ambitious woman with a calculated smile, and it was like he'd found his missing operating manual. They married when I was about 7. Hildy's smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. It was more like she was assessing me, figuring out where I fit on a spreadsheet of liabilities and assets. They had my half-brothers, Jesse and Kyle, a few years later. Their life wasn't just a magazine spread. It was a meticulously curated museum exhibit. A big, silent house in a neighborhood with manicured lawns where kids didn't play in the streets. 2 new cars that were swapped out on a schedule, vacations to places I only saw on TV, documented in perfect, framed photographs on their mantel. My visits were a scheduled obligation, a line item on his calendar. Every other weekend I'd be picked up, often by Hildy, with a sigh that suggested I was interrupting something more important. Driven to this perfect cold house and essentially left to my own devices. I'd watch them from the staircase. Dad helping Jesse with his homework, Hildy quizzing Kyle on his spelling words, the 4 of them laughing at a movie in their home theater. I was a ghost haunting the edges of their perfect life, a smudge on their pristine window. They converted my room, a small impersonal guest room, into a home gym when Jesse was born. My few things, a toothbrush, some pajamas, a book, were moved to a fold-out cot in the laundry room, next to the detergent and the ironing board. I stopped going over as much after that. The excuses started to come easier for both of us. The real kicker, the thing that carved the divide into stone, was college. It was just a given that I was on my own. My mom helped where she could, sending me $20–50 when she could scrape it together, which I knew was money she needed for groceries or her own crumbling car. I worked 30 hours a week waiting tables, my feet aching, my soul tired, taking out loans that still keep me up at night, and lived on a diet of ramen, frozen vegetables, and existential dread. There were months where my big grocery shop was a jar of generic peanut butter, a loaf of discount bread, and a giant bottle of the cheapest multivitamins I could find, hoping it would stave off the scurvy or whatever nutrient deficiency I was courting. I graduated somehow with a degree in marketing through sheer grit, caffeine, and a stubborn refusal to fail. Not a single offer of help. Not a loan, not a cosign, not even a care package. When I brought it up once, hesitantly, over a stilted Christmas dinner that felt more like a business meeting, Hildy had quickly interjected, her voice like shattering glass, about how expensive private school was for Jesse and Kyle and how they were maximizing their contributions to their college funds. The subject was closed with a finality that felt physical. I remember Dad just nodding along, studying his mashed potatoes as if they held the secrets of the universe, avoiding my eyes. I figured that was just the way it was. I was his past, they were his future. A closed chapter. Fast forward to now. I'm 28. I've clawed my way up in my career. I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable. I'm stable. I have my own apartment that I pay for myself, and the furniture might be IKEA, but it's my IKEA. And I met John. Wonderful, kind, solid John, whose family welcomed me with an open-hearted generosity I didn't know existed. They're not wealthy like my dad, but they're rich in everything that matters. Love, support, laughter that echoes through their comfortably cluttered house. They remember my favorite foods, ask about my work with genuine interest, and his mother, Martha, calls me just to chat, to tell me a funny story about John as a kid. It's everything I ever wanted and never dared to hope for. John proposed 6 months ago. It was perfect and simple, on a hike at our favorite spot at sunrise. No fanfare, just him, me, and a ring he'd saved for a year. When we started planning the wedding, John, being the traditional sweet man he is, asked if he should ask my dad for his blessing. I laughed, a dry, hollow sound. What for? I said. His blessing. Or his checkbook. But then I thought about it. Maybe this was his chance. Maybe this was the olive branch. Maybe the idea of walking me down the aisle would spark some long-dormant paternal instinct. Okay, I said against my better judgment. Let's see what he says. John came back from the lunch looking pleased. He was thrilled, he said, pulling me into a hug. He got a little emotional, actually. He said he's always dreamed of walking his little girl down the aisle. I remember feeling a weird, cautious warmth in my chest. Maybe I'd been too harsh. Maybe he did care in his own stunted, emotionally constipated way. Maybe the wedding would be the catalyst for a new start, a real relationship. We planned everything. John's parents, bless them, insisted on paying for most of it. They said having me join their family was the only gift they needed. I was paying for my own dress, a simple, beautiful thing I'd fallen in love with, and my mom and Jake's travel and outfits. We never expected a dime from my dad, and we didn't get one. Not an offer, not a hint of an offer. Not even a, is there anything we can contribute to? We sent the invitations. He RSVP'd for all 4 of them. Him, Hildy, Jesse, and Kyle. The card was perfectly filled out in Hildy's precise handwriting. Then 2 weeks ago everything shattered. I was at my dad's house for the first time in ages. Hildy had insisted I come over to show me some family jewelry I might want to borrow for the wedding. It was a transparent ploy to see the ring, get details about the wedding venue and cost she could gossip about with her friends. But I went, trying to be the bigger person, trying to believe in the fantasy of the proud father. I was in the home office. A sterile room that smelled of leather and lemon polish, waiting for her to come down with the jewelry box, when I noticed their old 4-drawer filing cabinet was slightly ajar. I'm not proud of what I did next, but a lifetime of curiosity about the inner workings of this secretive, perfect family got the better of me. A lifetime of feeling like an outsider looking in. I nudged it open. There were hanging files labeled taxes, mortgage, insurance, Jesse, Kyle. My heart started pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I shouldn't. It was a huge invasion of privacy. It was wrong. But my hand, acting on its own, a physical manifestation of 2 decades of unanswered questions, pulled out the file labeled Jesse. Inside were old report cards with gold stars, soccer participation medals, and bank statements from a prestigious investment firm. I opened one, my fingers leaving faint smudges on the crisp paper. It was a trust fund. The statement was from last month. The balance made my breath catch in my throat. It was more money than I'd made in the last 5 years combined. I frantically grabbed Kyle's file. Same thing. Another trust fund, another staggering life-changing amount of money. The statements went back years. Monthly contributions, dividends, compound interest, building a future for them on a foundation I wasn't allowed to stand on. My hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled. I felt hot and cold at once, a wave of nausea washing over me. This was money that had been accumulated over years and years. While I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for the 3rd day in a row and crying over my student loan statements, he'd been systematically pouring thousands of dollars into accounts for my half-brothers. He was dreaming of walking me down the aisle while actively, financially, building a moat between his real family and me. I heard Hildy's sharp heels clicking on the stairs and slammed the drawer shut, my face pale, my palms sweaty. She came in holding a tacky rhinestone-studded bracelet that looked like it came from a costume shop. "This was my grandmother's," she said, her voice dripping with false sentiment. "It's vintage. Very valuable. I thought it might add a touch of history to your day." I couldn't even look at her. The hypocrisy was suffocating. I mumbled an excuse about a sudden migraine, that I felt sick, and practically ran out of the house, leaving her standing there, the cheap bracelet dangling from her fingers. I drove around for an hour, crying tears of pure, unadulterated rage. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. Not really. It was about the value. The worth. The blatant, quantifiable proof of what I'd always felt. In his eyes, I was worth the bare minimum of child support and the social obligation of awkward dinners. Jesse and Kyle were worth secure futures, paid educations, down payments on houses. He could stand there and claim he dreamed of giving me away, while he was actively, on paper, giving them everything. I called my brother Jake. I told him everything, my words tumbling out in a sobbing, incoherent mess. He was silent for a long time, and I could hear the low rumble of his anger on the other end of the line. "That tracks," he said finally, his voice flat with a resigned fury I knew all too well. "I'm sorry, Lori. I'm so sorry. But are you really surprised?" He was right. The shock wasn't in the discovery but in the cold, hard evidence of it. "So what are you going to do?" I knew what I had to do. The fantasy was dead, incinerated by those bank statements. I couldn't let him stand up there next to me, playing the part of the proud, loving father when he was nothing of the sort. It would be a lie, a grotesque pantomime, and my wedding day, my future with John, deserved truth. It deserved authenticity. I didn't call him. I didn't make a scene. I just acted. I drove to Jake's apartment, my eyes still red and puffy. I asked him to walk me down the aisle. He's been my rock my entire life. The one constant male figure who showed up without fail, even when it was just to bring me a pizza during finals week or let me cry on his couch after a bad date. He's my big brother. He looked at me, saw my resolve, and pulled me into a bone-crushing hug. "I'd be honored," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely honored." I thought that would be the end of it. I thought my dad, in his world of assumptions and minimal effort, would just assume his role without any confirmation, like he always assumed his mere presence was a gift in itself. I'd just have the wedding planner adjust the schedule. He'd show up, see Jake standing there, and be forced to swallow his pride in public. A small, petty part of me liked that idea. I was wrong. Last night he showed up at my apartment unannounced. John was at a guy's night with his friends, so I was alone, curled up on the couch with a book, trying to quiet my mind. The doorbell rang, an insistent buzz. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach drop. It was him. I thought about not answering, but avoidance had defined our relationship for too long. I opened the door. Laura, we need to talk, he said, his voice tight, stepping inside without an invitation. He was still in his work suit, but his tie was loosened and he looked agitated. Okay, about what? I asked, already knowing, my heart starting to hammer again. I crossed my arms over my chest, a defensive gesture. Hildy was finalizing our outfits for the wedding, he began, pacing slightly in my small living room. She called the wedding planner to ask about the specific color of my tie, for the coordinated pictures with you and John after the ceremony. The planner seemed confused. She said she had Jake down to walk you down the aisle. That I was listed as a guest. He stopped pacing and stared at me, waiting for an explanation, his expression a mixture of anger and utter bewilderment. I just looked back, my newfound resolve hardening in my chest like ice. Is that true? He demanded, his voice rising. After everything? You're having Jake do it? After I've been looking forward to this my entire life. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. Your entire life? Really, Dad? Let's be specific. Which part of your life? The part where you missed every single father-daughter dance because you were busy at work? The part where you didn't call me for 3 months after I graduated college? The part where you built 6-figure trust funds for your sons while I took out loans to eat peanut butter? That's the life you've been dreaming about this in. He flinched, physically recoiling as if I'd slapped him. But his anger quickly overrode his momentary shame. That is none of your business, he yelled, his face turning red. That's for their future. It's complicated. And what was my future, Dad? I fired back, my voice shaking but loud, filling the small space. Ramen noodles and maxed-out credit cards? Why did they deserve a future without struggle and I didn't? What made them more deserving? It's different, he roared, finally losing his tightly controlled composure. They're my kids. I have to provide for them. It's my responsibility. The silence that followed was deafening. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of my refrigerator. He realized what he'd said the moment the words left his mouth. His face went from red to a sickly pale. His jaw slackened. I felt a chilling, surreal calm wash over me. The fight drained out of me, replaced by a profound, absolute certainty. Oh, I said, my voice quiet and terrifyingly steady. I see. They're your kids. And what am I? Laura, that's not what I meant, he stammered, taking a step back, his hands coming up in a placating gesture. You're twisting my words. I'm not twisting anything, I said, my voice flat. It's exactly what you meant. It's what you've always meant. You have never, not for a single day of my life, considered me your kid. I'm an obligation. A mistake from your past that you have to occasionally acknowledge and write a check for. You don't get to play proud father at my wedding. You don't get to give me away when you gave me up a long, long time ago. He looked utterly defeated. The anger was gone, replaced by a flustered, panicked energy. He had been unmasked and he had no script for this. If you do this, he said, his voice low and desperate now. If you humiliate me like this in front of all our family and friends, I'm not sure I can approve of this marriage. I'm not sure I can support it. I smiled then, a cold, thin, utterly humorless smile. Good. That makes this easier. Then you won't have to struggle with your conscience attending it. Consider the problem solved. The invitation is rescinded. For you, for Hildy, for Jesse and Kyle. Don't come. His jaw dropped. He looked genuinely shocked, as if the concept of consequences for his actions was an alien notion. You can't be serious. Laura, be reasonable. This is my daughter's wedding. I am being reasonable, I said, walking to the door and holding it open. The finality of the gesture was immense. I'm finally being reasonable. Get out of my apartment. He stared at me for a long moment, a tumult of emotions crossing his face. Anger, confusion, shame, and finally a hollow resignation. He left without another word, his shoulders slumped. I locked the door behind him, slid down to the floor and cried. I cried for the little girl who always sat by the window waiting for a dad who rarely came. I cried from the sheer emotional exhaustion of finally, after 28 years, saying the words out loud. But mostly I cried with a staggering sense of relief. The charade was finally, definitively over. John came home later and found me on the floor, curled up against the door. He didn't ask questions. He just gathered me up, carried me to the couch and held me while I told him everything. The trust funds, the confrontation, the disinvitation. He was furious, but not at me. Never at me. His anger was a protective, righteous thing. I'm so sorry, Laura. I'm so sorry he's like this. What a fucking coward, he muttered, stroking my hair. But I'm so proud of you. You were incredibly brave. You stood up for yourself in a way you never should have had to. Do you think I did the right thing? I asked, needing his reassurance, needing to hear it from someone who loved me. I think, he said, kissing my forehead, his voice firm and sure, that you finally gave him the consequences he's deserved for 28 years. This isn't on you. This is on him. You protected our day. You protected us. The fallout has been nuclear as expected. Hildy has blown up my phone with a torrent of texts ranging from vitriolic, "You're a spiteful, ungrateful little girl tearing this family apart over jealousy," to manipulative and pleading, "He's your father. He's heartbroken. You'll regret this on your wedding day." I've blocked her number. My half-brothers, who are teenagers and have mostly been indifferent to me anyway, have sent a few angry messages from their iPhones, no doubt paid for by the trust fund, blaming me for making Dad sad and causing drama. I sent them a simple reply, "This is between me and Dad. I love you guys." And I left it at that. They're kids, caught in the crossfire of their father's failings. It hurts. Of course it hurts. It's a deep, aching loss for a relationship I never really had but always hoped for. But the overwhelming feeling, the one that rises above the hurt, is freedom. It's like a weight I've been carrying since childhood has finally been lifted. I called my mom and told her the whole story. She was silent for a full minute and I could hear her lighting a cigarette on the other end of the line, a habit she breaks out only for extreme stress. Then she said, "Well, it's about damn time you saw him for what he is. I never wanted to say it because he's your dad and a mother shouldn't poison that well. But, yeah. Good for you, baby. Jake will be a much better choice. He loves you more in his little finger than your dad does in his whole body." Her validation meant everything. My wedding is in 3 months. It will be smaller now without my dad's side of the family. But it will be filled to the brim with people who genuinely love and support me and John. It will be a true celebration of the family we're choosing, not a performance for one we never had. And when I walk down the aisle on the strong, steady arm of my big brother, the man who is always there, I won't be given away. I will be walking forward confidently and joyfully toward my future, toward John, finally leaving the heavy, burdensome weight of my father's disapproval and conditional love behind me for good. I'm choosing my family. And it feels incredible.